Hey, hi, hello. This is Spock Sanctuary. Today we've got Cam and Cole, and then we also have our director of marketing, Olivia, with us today. Go ahead and
Hi.
yeah. So Olivia had this really cool idea that she wanted to kind of bring to life. So she's gonna be asking us some questions. I have no idea what she has prepared. But you get to hear, I guess, the insight from Cole and I.
Another neat thing that you might notice is that we are not in our normal recording areas. So we got access to the school podcast area, so we figured why we might as well use it. And also, if you have noticed any of our previous videos within the last month, you might have heard some new voices. That would have been Olivia as well. So she's been kind of killing it lately, and today should be no different. Without further ado, go ahead and take it away.
All right, we're going to do a little bit of a trivia thing. Just some random facts that I thought were pretty interesting about reptiles, and we're going to see if they know anything about it as well. So we'll start with the first one. What is the world's smallest reptile?
Oh boy.
Once it gets into the small geckos, it's so weird.
I'm feeling like it's got to be like a microdactylus chameleon or something.
It is a nanochameleon.
Ah,
I know within the last like 5 years they discovered two new species. I'm not 5 years isn't I'm not super exact on that, but they discovered two new micro species in Madagascar,
yep.
and it's like the size of like your thumbnail is the entire chameleon. So it's super
It's
interesting.
they're tiny, and it seems like the smaller reptiles are the ones that keep getting discovered. Like we probably already know about all the big guys. You can see them, but the little ones, they find them and like hiding in the leaf litter and stuff, and they're so tiny, so nobody's ever like seen them before.
It also makes you think how many researchers have probably squished the little guys and not
Oh,
even known it. Like
That's so sad.
yeah, I know it's sad, but like you think about that, they're just chilling in the leaves. We didn't even notice.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a bit morbid. My bad.
this nano chameleon is about 13.5 millimeters long, not counting its tail, which is about the size of a sunflower seed. And it is
So
brown, and it cannot change colors like other chameleons. And it was discovered in 2021 in northern Madagascar.
Yeah.
very cool.
Within the last.
True or false? Chameleons change their color only for camouflage.
False. Actually, they don't use their skin coloration for camouflage nearly as much as what they primarily use it for, which is communication. So they will use it a little bit for thermoregulating. Darker colors means they'll hold in more warmth, and paler colors means that they'll reflect a little bit more. But just the intricacy of communication in their colors is so crazy. Because, like, veiled chameleons typically span from like a brown to a green, some yellows and that kind of thing. But like a gravid female that does not want to breed again will turn like stark black and have like vibrant blue spots come out.
Really?
And it's just the craziest thing to see like an animal that doesn't usually turn those colors just suddenly explode in these really vibrant brights. So,
Yeah. They also will change their color a little bit for thermal regulation. So if they're trying to get a little warmer, then they'll turn darker colors so they absorb more of that heat. But a lot of other lizard species we don't really realize, but a lot of lizard species can change color as well, not just chameleons. And I would say honestly, most other lizard species, this is quite a claim, but they do it more for camouflage than even chameleons, which is kind of interesting.
yeah.
We have a gargoyle gecko at the sanctuary, and he like sometimes I don't know where he is because he blends in so well. So it's really fascinating to work with all the lizards and see just how much variation there is in their colors.
Yeah, that was definitely when I found that out. I had never really known that it was for mood purposes rather than camouflage. So that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, question number 3. Are reptiles' hearts different than humans?
I'll let you see if you know this one.
Yes. So as a whole, yes. So I used to teach anatomy, and we would teach about different types of um, animal hearts. And so, like amphibians, I believe only have three chambers in their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can't. I want to say turtles are even different than snakes and lizards. I will say I know more about other systems in reptiles. So from that, aside from that, I'm gonna pass it to Cameron because
Okay, okay.
that's as far as mine goes.
Um, I'm pretty sure they have a three-chambered heart, but I think the reptilian heart that fascinates me most is in crocodilians. They have an extra valve that basically allows them to shuttle more oxygen straight to their stomach, and it goes into the goblet cells in their stomach that like produces the stomach acid, and so they can hyper concentrate their stomach acid, and that allows them to digest like way more efficiently than basically any other terrestrial animal. So like captive crocodilians tend to be obese because we don't account for their ability to digest every single thing when we're like formulating a diet for them. So like they're getting all of the extra nutrients out of the bone that normally an animal can't actually digest. And I think that's just so fascinating.
That is really interesting. Yeah, when I was researching it, I found that all reptiles have three-chambered hearts except for crocodiles. So
I might have had that wrong. I was thinking amphibians, but I knew something had three chambers.
I mean, amphibians might too.
Yeah,
But
it might
yeah.
be.
You might still be right.
I don't know.
All right, fourth question. True or false? Reptiles are endotherms.
False. That would be mammals. Birds are reptiles, and birds are endotherms. So they are an exception. But what we consider most widely to be reptiles are all ectotherms. And instead of being like mammals are homeothermic, we thrive best within a very strict body temperature. And reptiles are something called poikilothermic. So that means that their like safe body temperature range is massive, and it kind of fluctuates throughout the day to mimic their environment. And I think that's also really cool.
Another like thing to add on to that is like a lot of reptiles have adapted ways to manage their heat, aside from just like basking and stuff. So there's certain snakes that will vibrate, they'll twitch their muscles in order to warm up their eggs. And like tegus are somewhat in between the two, where they can not as much as like mammals, but like a lot more than most reptiles. They can manage their body heat in small increments.
Help to regulate it, yeah.
Yeah, regulate themselves. That's the word I was looking for. Another interesting thing is dinosaurs were kind of the same way. They were kind of in between the two, which is they were reptiles. So that's, I don't know, reptiles is a lot of different answers.
It's a
technically.
big
Yeah,
range.
it's a huge range.
Yeah. All right, number 5. Can reptiles chew their food?
That's fun. The weird thing is that reptiles are so broad that like you're like trying to think of an exception, but for the most part they don't. They kind of just bite it, and then they'll either use their tongue, like lizards is what I'm kind of thinking of. Snakes will sort of walk it down their throat. Lizards will use their tongue to push it back, and then they'll bite again, and then put their tongue forward and push it back. And then tegus, again, I keep going back to tegus, will kind of throw it back in their gullet. But it's a huge range of what the eating mechanisms are. But the long story short, no, they don't chew.
They bite. They'll break off
Yeah.
chunks. But as far as like sitting there and working it in their jaw like we do, I don't think.
Their jaws cannot do the grinding motion like ours do, so they cannot technically chew.
Yeah. A lot of them, if they need to get smaller pieces, will actually like whip back and forth. So we have a blue tongue skink, and if he gets anything a meaty texture, so far as like hornworms even are meaty enough for them that they'll just whip it back and forth. If you get a chance, look up a video of a blue tongue skink eating a hornworm, and it is
so
quite
funny.
the wild sight. But that is how they break down their food. Even though they have molar-like structures, they don't use it to grind. They use it to just crush.
All right, next question. True or false? Snakes' scales are made of keratin, the same substance that makes up our hair and fingernails.
This is true. The protein is still keratin. The structure of the protein is a little bit different, which is why their like texture is different. And it's actually so like densely packed that it does waterproof their body. So like humans will get wrinkly skin if you sit in the bathtub for too long because eventually our skin starts to take in some water. And in reptiles, that keratin is just so like tightly bound that it doesn't allow that. And so some reptiles will actually have a mechanism for like transporting water. Like the horned toad, I think, can do it. And veiled chameleons, where they'll have like almost a channel through their scales, and it helps to like transport water closer to their mouth so that they can drink. And it's a really neat adaptation to be able to work with like how they acquire their water.
I found that they have a soft underdermis and then the keratin layer, which is why they're rough, but yet like still kind of squishy, which I thought was very interesting.
It's weird to describe reptiles as squishy a little bit. Kind of.
They're just like soft.
Yeah, it's not like it's something like
It's
a
not like-
rock,
yeah.
you know.
Mhm. We get that all the time with our geckos. People hold our geckos and they're like, "Whoa, why is it soft?" Yeah.
Another thing, like when you get scales as small as like geckos, they'll have like a hydrophobic, like if they'll get a water drop on it, it will just sit or like bounce off, and it's really like fascinating to watch. Whenever you like mist the geckos or see the misting system go off, and it's just like they're covered in like little speckles.
Next question. Are cats poisonous to some reptile species?
So, yes, specifically their saliva, right? So if you think about cats, a lot of their day is spent licking themselves. So even their hairs, if it gets, spread around, that has remnants of their saliva on it. So a good rule of thumb that we always tell either new keepers or just keepers in general that have both is try to keep them separate, which is just a good rule of thumb in general with small animals and basically an apex predator. It's hard for a lot of people to like grasp that.
We've seen a keeper that had 5 viper geckos. They're a very, very small species of gecko. And the like shed fur from her cats kind of built up inside of their enclosure, and it did end up killing the whole colony. So like I haven't seen it in, I guess, a larger species, but smaller species have less ability to fight back against those toxins, and so it takes a lot less for it to become lethal. So.
Which, in addition to just like the actual toxins, I don't know if toxins is the right term in this case, but
It's harmful microorganisms in
okay.
their saliva.
Gotcha. Okay.
so more like bacteria and stuff, I imagine. But I don't know in that case if it was the bacteria or if it was just the hairs. Like imagine if a gecko just got hairballs. Like that's not a thing that they're built
to handle.
Yeah, exactly. I don't
Yeah.
know.
This is something I didn't know until I started working here because, like, I don't know, that's just not common knowledge and it's not something I would have thought about. But okay, for our next question, true or false? All species of snakes lay eggs.
It's false, for sure. So even like garter snakes, which are common around here in Iowa, they don't lay eggs, which for them works out because they are a communal species, so they all live together. So as soon as they're born, they're already living with their parents. Granted, they don't stay there near as long as we do, but a lot of the snakes exhibit
Viviparity. That's
Yeah.
what, I sat there like searching my brain, like what's the word?
Yeah, there are a good chunk, and there are specific groups that don't and do. Off the top of my head, I don't want to just
I'm pretty sure boids, so like anacondas and boa constrictors, are either ovoviviparous, meaning they like hold their eggs inside of them instead of laying them, or they're viviparous, and I don't remember which exactly. But when the baby leaves their body, it is no longer like it's not in an egg. Whether the egg hatches inside the mom or it's more of a placental mechanism, I don't recall exactly, but
It's not just snakes either. So,
Yeah.
like geckos lay eggs. But skinks they might be ovoviv. Oh,
I think blue
words.
tongues are ovoviv.
So they have the eggs inside of them, but they give live birth across the reptile kingdom. I think for the most part, testudines are all egg bearing, but
I haven't heard of any
yeah.
testudines
Um,
that don't lay eggs.
But there's a large variety even in lizards, which makes sense because they're closely related to snakes. And I wonder where that cutoff is evolutionarily.
It's
between-
actually multiple times evolved.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Well, I
There have
don't know
been-
if it was like in the, when snakes were lizards time period or something.
Oh, gotcha.
But
Yeah,
I
no.
don't know.
If you look at a tree of like the 3 types of birthing mechanisms, I guess,
First thing.
they have each evolved multiple times in the reptile kingdom. So we've seen, I believe, eggs are the ancestral, so ovoparous. But then the ability to hold on to that egg, and eventually from holding on to that egg, that turned into kind of a sort of placental mechanism. But it benefits the mother in several ways because if something goes wrong, then she still has very easy access to the nutrients. So in some species that lay eggs, we'll see that adults might eat those eggs. And by holding on to the babies, one, the babies have a better chance of surviving by the source of other adults, but 2, if the mom's in a tight spot, then she can rely on that nutrition.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Next question. True or false? There are 4 major groups of reptiles.
That's a complicated question. So the way I break it down when I talk to students is I talk about reptiles as lizards, snakes, turtles, tortoises, terrapins, birds, crocodilians. I'm missing one. Tuatara.
Interesting. It told me there were only 4, and you named those 4,
Right,
but
but
then you added 2.
a lot of people combine snakes and lizards because they're squamata. Because technically they're
They're all
way
in the same
closer
order.
related. Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's a lot easier to talk to students by breaking them into 2. And then a lot of people don't consider it's either that they didn't consider birds in that, or that they didn't consider the tuatara because it's a single species.
It was the birds and the tuatara.
Okay,
that
so
did
they
not
did
consider.
split up snakes and
They
lizards, though,
did.
which is interesting
Interesting.
because that's I don't know. Technically speaking, depending on where you are talking about, if you're talking about like genus versus like way up higher classification,
Yep.
then it kind of depends on what the answer you're looking for is. But when I talk to students, I usually say there's 6. But depending on who you talk to, that could go as low as 4 or even 3. I'm going to add one thing. Technically, birds are dinosaurs, so it makes it a lot easier to think about that way.
Last question. How many species of reptiles are there today?
But
Um,
it's always really hard,
It's always growing.
to answer questions that are like continually.
Like every month there are new discoveries, and there's oh god, there's a website that I'm currently entirely blanking on, but like every month it updates with what new reptiles were discovered this last month, and I think that's a fun thing to keep up on. But I feel like right now we're in the ballpark of, I'm gonna say 70K.
It says more than 10,000 is what everything was saying to me.
70K is more than 10,000.
So
That
yeah,
is
technically
true.
right.
10,001 actually.
So I don't
No,
know.
that's a really hard.
Again, it
Question.
also depends if they were considering the birds
Mhm.
like as a reptile as well.
And then sometimes we'll have one species, and then we'll find out that there's actually 2 species.
Yeah.
So right now there's a lot of debate on this new anaconda that was discovered in the Amazon, and whether or not green anacondas are actually northern and southern green anacondas, or if they're still just green anacondas. if there's enough genetic difference to consider it a new species.
Mhm.
Which is also hard because apparently that snake that was discovered is no longer alive, which is interesting. So I don't know how much genetic testing they've done on it, and if it's like set in stone or if it's still up in the air. I don't know.
Interesting.
Something to keep up to date. Google it. It's a fun time.
Yeah.
This is very recently. But
They're
like,
considering the new species, the northerns, to be the larger of the two, right?
yes,
Yeah.
but there's a lot. I mean, that's the other thing is there's a lot of debate in the scientific community, no matter what you claim. So it's it's a very hard question, and that's just like part of working in a scientific community is it's hard to create borders on a natural concept, right? Because nature doesn't really have borders, right? Like
Some
animals
may.
don't abide by state lines, for example. They just kind of go about their day. And so a lot of the time when we classify an animal, it's hard to say, where their range extends and all that. So it's very interesting. That's part of why I love it is because there's no right answer in many cases, but it's the thirst for knowledge, I suppose.
Even like a good example of that, I guess, is Tilly, our three-toed box turtle. Legally, we can keep her because technically she's not native to Iowa. Their native range is considered to go all the way up to like the north border of Missouri. But there are stragglers that come into Iowa. So like there's a chance that you could hypothetically see a three-toed box turtle just roaming naturally in southern Iowa. But according to like the classification and state laws, they are not considered to be a native species around here.
It also makes it very difficult to write those laws because what is a native species? And if you ask one DNR person and another DNR person, they might have two different answers on, hey, that's illegal. But the other nice thing is in either case, in Iowa, there is laws that allow you to collect wild specimens for harvest, I believe. But if you keep them in like,
I think you get up to
fatten them up,
3
yeah.
technically.
I think it's like, well, it's a pound, it's a weight. Which
Oh,
is
it's a
weird.
weight.
And it's supposed to be for like if you go out once a year and eat turtles, I guess. This is what the weight requirement is. But there is a lot of fuzziness about whether or not you can like fatten them up first, sort of thing, which is kind of interesting. So if you've ever collected a turtle from the wild and you're like, oh no, the feds are coming, don't worry too much. There are technically our built-in, limitations that allow for a certain amount of leeway. So don't stress too much. Okay, so that is the last of our questions. If you liked this video and you want to see more videos like it, consider subscribing. Check out our socials on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, etc. Or follow along in our journey. Come see our storefront. And we hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.